Wonderful. Well, it's fantastic, Beth, to have you here. Hi, everyone who's tuning in. My name is Rachel Cossar. I'm co-founder and CEO at Virtual Sapiens. And this talk show that I'm hosting is called Conversations in the Future of Work, because as we know, the world of work is evolving almost every second of every day, or at least that's what it feels like to me. And I thought it would be helpful to bring in some of the wonderful thought leaders and professionals who are either in the coaching, training, executive leadership, or science spaces, and ask them their thoughts on where we are in the future of work and how we can prepare, especially around the topics of communication and showing up. So I'm very pleased to welcome Beth Rogers, president and owner of Point Taken Consulting. And Beth, I'll just throw it over to you to share a few words about yourself, your background, and whatever you think is relevant.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate it. I have started Point Taken 21 years ago, so I feel like I have been doing this forever, but it's been such a pleasure. What we do at Point Taken is we work with executives on their communication skills, essentially the spaces between people. How do you get ideas from inside your head to inside somebody else's head? Either through a presentation, or facilitating a meeting, writing something down, a proposal, a recommendation, all those skills around persuasion and negotiation and communication. That's where we focus, which I think a lot of people perhaps think of those things as givens, like you were either born with it or not born with it. And they don't actually recognize that they are skills that can be learned, that anybody can learn how to do this, and anybody can be passably good at this. We liken this to playing tennis, right? Anybody can play tennis. Now, not everybody can play at the level, of the championship games around the world, but anybody could play a pretty good game of tennis if you wanted to, and if you learn the skills to do it. So it's much the same here. That's what we focus on, is teaching those skills. My work background was in pharma and biotech. So we tend to work with pharma, biotech, high-tech financial companies, places where smart technical people have to talk to other smart but less technical people. So there's a translation element. I also teach at Boston University. I teach executive leadership skills to the MBA students. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for asking me.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's dive in, because I know one of the questions I have for you is, like, what are some of the main communication challenges that your clients are facing as they navigate this kind of hybrid, right? Specifically hybrid world of work.
Yeah. COVID changed the game for all of us, right? It changed the skills that were necessary to be successful in meetings, because our meetings were happening either all on a virtual platform, or some people live, some people on a virtual platform. And that creates a new set of challenges for executives running their meetings, and not necessarily one that they had the skills to do well in yet. So the biggest challenge was they don't actually know how to do it well. Now, we're 3 years in, we've all learned things, we've all come to conclusions about what works, what doesn't work. So at this moment, what we're experiencing now is people have some trail dust and have figured out these things I think work, but they really need that reinforcement of, do they really work? Is there something else I should be doing? Hybrid particularly is incredibly mentally challenging, right? Because you as the facilitator, or you as the presenter, have to manage not only the people who are live in front of you, but also the people who are on a virtual platform. And you have to keep all of that in your head at the same time. So it's incredibly mentally demanding. And many of us are it's more demanding than we thought it was going to be. And so we're struggling with, how do I make this all work and still remember the content that I want to say?
Right. Absolutely. And for those hybrid meetings, and so just to be clear, right, when we say hybrid, we're talking about, maybe half of the participants are in a conference room in person, and then the other half are tuning in from video, right?
Yes.
What are some of because I tend to almost say, like, get everyone on their own devices so that everyone's virtual, right? Level the playing field. But that's not always possible. So what are some tips or best practices that you give for running a hybrid meeting effectively?
right? Well, we first start with it. It really depends on how strong your communication skills are.
Mhm.
So you're going to need to be a really strong presence in the room if you are in the room with people. Now, it is also possible in the hybrid meeting that there's a room full of people together without you somewhere and you are hybrid, right? You
Right.
are virtual.
Right.
And so you really need to kind of get the lay of the land, understanding where the players are in your audience and who is who. One of the things that I hope will come out of this interview is the importance of understanding your audience,
Yeah.
right? I think we think about this as, am I ready to give a presentation? Am I ready to communicate something from a content perspective? And we feel like that's what drives everything, right? It's the content.
Right.
But it's really not. It's how well you understand your audience, right? In
Mhm.
addition to understanding your content, because the same content can fly with some audiences and not fly with others. You have to truly understand who your audience is. So you've got to do a little bit of work here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I like to think of it as, once you understand that audience, now you're breaking it down to how much time am I spending paying attention to the people live in the room, and how much attention am I giving to the virtual platform. The hard part for participants on a virtual platform, if there's a group of people live together who are with the facilitator or the meeting runner at that moment, they get all the airtime. It's hard to break in.
Right.
So as a facilitator, you have to really work to allow that your participants who are on a virtual platform have the time and space, the sort of on ramp to get into the
Mhm.
conversation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, facilitation just goes to a completely different level. If the context of the event for you is that you're facilitating, right? It's like I like to compare it to theater in the round. You're no longer just projecting out to one audience. You have to be aware of the people who are behind you who you've like forgotten about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit here,
Sure.
because we also do a little bit of work together within the university space. And so, what is the difference, or is there a difference between the work you do with the MBA students
Mhm.
and then the work that you're doing with professionals who are in the field?
There are a lot of commonalities, but there's one major significant difference that I notice, and that is the motivation for why they are there. Completely appropriately, my MBA students are focused on how well am I doing? What grade am I getting? Right.
Mhm.
So they are motivated by performing well to get a good grade in the class, which is a very different motivation than what might bring an adult learner to a
Mm.
class, which is I'm struggling with some aspect of my work and I'd like to get better at it. Or conversely, and this happens, somebody told me I have to go to this class, so I'm going to this class.
Right.
Right. So there's much more of a mix of motivations with our corporate clients, whereas the students are more uniform in their motivation in this way. But
Right.
for both groups, we look for those aha moments when they realize, oh, wait, I can do things to change the perception that other people have of me. I can control this more than I thought I could.
Mhm.
And that moment happens for all audiences, right? No matter what their backgrounds are, they have that realization of like, okay, I I can be better at this and I can be really good at this if I just work a little bit at it. If I understand what I'm doing, the mechanics of it, and I put a little effort in, I could really be spectacular.
Yeah.
And so it's always a pleasure for me to find those things, those moments for our students, both our university students as well as our corporate client students. But in the
Mhm.
university setting, I see them for a longer period,
Oh,
right? I see
interesting. Yeah.
them over a semester. And as such, I see that development and I see that spark and I see people actually physically change
Mm.
and have like life altering moments where they realize that there are other things open to them because they can do this now. That the better they got at this, the more. I think last semester I had a student who was considering running for student government. And he he was thinking about this. And so we had chatted about it early in the semester. And I said, why don't you use this course as a way to workshop your campaign communication, right? So figure out how to communicate with other people about your campaign ideas. And so that's what he
Mm.
used as content. And he was ultimately voted in, and he was the first part time student ever voted into student government for the MBA program. Like no part-time students had ever either wanted or were successful in their bids to make it to student government. But that just pivot just changed for him the trajectory of his career at BU.
Right. Wow. I mean, that's so powerful. I at Virtual Sapiens, we have corporate clients, of course, and then we do have some university partners, as you know, and
Yeah.
I love the idea of getting people when they're in a slightly riper environment of learning or context of learn, like the muscle of learning is really being worked.
Yes.
Um, and it sounds a little bit like you can access that.
I agree with you. I think that students in the university program know, like, they are there to learn. They are primed to learn. They're in an environment and in a mindset where they are like sponges, right? And they will absorb things. And so that, I think, is a little bit the difference. You don't find that same level of spongeness in all of your corporate clients, right? Because they're just at a variety of different places.
Right. Yeah, fascinating. Well, it's great that you get to do both of those things.
It
I
is
think
really fun.
it's like it's almost like if you're like doing like work in a super corporate setting and you get to volunteer at a nonprofit, you keep
Yeah.
yourself a little more well-rounded.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So going back to some of your coaching work specifically,
Mhm.
I'd love to hear some of your, like, what do you think are the most powerful points that you like to get across to your clients when you're trying to help them show up on video in a way that's more reflective of, who they are, their authenticity and their communication effectiveness?
Right. So virtual platforms have their own set of skills that go along with that. And the couple of main ones. One is remembering to look at the camera, right? The idea
Yeah.
of, like, here we are, you and I are chatting. I really want to look at you. I want to look at your picture. If we had data, I would want to look at the data, the slide that was being presented.
Mhm,
Unfortunately, if I do that, what I look like to the other people on the conference is this, right?
mhm.
I look like I'm not looking at you. I look like I'm
Right.
not paying attention.
Yeah.
And so you have that impression that I'm not paying attention, that I'm not listening. When in fact, I am tremendously connected to the content, but that doesn't come across that
Yeah.
way.
Right.
And one of the things I love about Virtual Sapiens is that it gives people feedback
Yeah.
on what they are physically doing, right?
Right.
And a score associated with that, so that they can see, are they contributing to the perception of competence? Are they contributing to looking more confident? Are their behaviors supporting that? And if not, what needs to change?
Right.
So eye contact, super important. Voice also,
Mhm.
all the aspects of voice, pace, pauses, volume level, like all the pieces of your voice, particularly in a virtual setting, will carry a lot of weight. So
Mhm.
we've got to work on having our voices be the most animated, engaged, energetic voices that we have, so that we are communicating how strongly we are committed to our audience and committed to our content.
Mhm.
Again, the really helpful tool of giving people, because I mean, we see each other on virtual settings all the time. We never see ourselves. We see ourselves, there we are, but
Yeah.
we never we never have the moment to analyze ourselves,
Right.
right? Of what we're doing and how it's coming across. So having a tool that gives that view to a student, any kind of student, university student, corporate student, is fantastic, because it gives them something concrete to look at and
Yeah.
to work on and to say,
Mhm.
this is what contributed to your score. Here are ways to improve that score.
Right.
And as a coach, it gives me a roadmap for saying, okay, there are things
Mhm.
that we need to be doing. Here's the behaviors I need to coach you on. Now, I could always do that. I can always, look at someone's video
Yeah.
and say, this is what's going on. But it's so much more powerful when they have this metric associated with
Mm.
it, right? It's not just, I thought this was what you should be doing, but rather, here's a metric that
Right.
has a score that, has an algorithm behind it. That is a powerful tool.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I always found when we started Virtual Sapiens, I was doing just the live coaching, live facilitation, and was getting frustrated with the number of times I would say things, and people would really really get it and be like, absolutely, totally, of course, wow, I hadn't even thought about that. And then we would go away and I would see them again and nothing had changed, because it's
Right.
it's, as amazing as it would be, Beth, to have you on all of my calls, or like every day being like, hey, remember this and that and this, right? It's just not
It's just not possible.
possible. So you get to kind of have this wonderful combination between the two, but which actually leads us into this next question, which you teed up beautifully. But where does, right, we're used to historically communication coaching being something that can only happen in person, right?
Yeah.
Like, where does technology, where does AI come into it? You've mentioned you're a wonderful client of ours. So
I am swimming in evaluating AI right now because obviously at at Boston University we are looking at what's the appropriate use of AI and how do we teach students about it and how do we help them understand. And so I'm just going to kind of take one step back and then answer this question. My
yeah,
one step back is AI is, particularly generative AI, is a tool, right? It's a tool like a car is a tool,
yeah,
right? So, but it's a change in how we do things. So we're all having our change reactions, which is some people love change, jump on it, think it's the best thing ever. How could we have ever lived without this before?
yeah,
Some people are like, no, no, this is really dangerous and we should shy away from it. And we should not use this because it's new and it's different and we don't understand it. And until we have better rules about it, right? So everybody's, on one part of that continuum between those two ends.
hmm,
But the reality is it exists, it is here. And as a future leader or even as a current leader, you got to know what to do with it,
yeah,
right? You need to understand what are the benefits, but also what are the challenges of this. One of the benefits is, of course, that it does this. It allows us to make algorithms of things that used to be done live, right? But can be done using AI support to
yeah,
be done faster, uh, over greater distances because we can be virtual with each other, right? It supports that ability to not have to be live with someone
right,
all the time. The flip side of this, of course, when we talk about it, particularly for our students at BU, is it's a source like any other source, right? Particularly, and we focus a little bit on Chat GPT because that's the
yeah,
800-pound gorilla in the space right now.
right,
But Chat GPT is really focused on language, right? Its strength is language. It is not strong on providing sources for its information. It is not strong in helping you understand its bias because
yeah,
it's not providing sources. So we say you can use it, but as a source like any other source. So you
right,
got to reference it. You got to
yep,
tell me what you searched, so I can see what you got as feedback, so that you're not copying off of AI to do your assignment, but you're
mhm,
using it as a tool, as a source of information for completing your own work, right?
right,
And so I think it's best to think of AI as it's really, really helpful in certain situations
mhm,
and has some drawbacks in other situations. And
yeah,
so let's figure out where those lines are and use it for the things that it really does help us do.
yeah,
And one of the things it helps us do here, even at Point Taken, is to do this kind of work at a distance, right? To do
yeah,
coaching at a distance with someone. I don't have to be in your office in
right,
Brisbane, California,
right,
to actually help you get better at this. We can do this on a virtual platform with a tool like Virtual Sapiens, using applied AI there to do the same quality and level of work that we've done before. And then
right,
they can use it afterward
right,
as well.
right, right. Yeah, I think like you really hit the nail on the head with like, where can AI facilitate our experience, or amplify our experience in a way that wouldn't have been possible, because like humans just don't scale all that well, right? um I
Yeah.
wish, I mean, yeah, I wish I could scale myself better, but I mean, this AI is really the only answer. And so it's magical and almost wonderful that we're able to do that, but you have to really tread carefully. And I think something else you said that I think would be a key takeaway here for our listeners is um the discussion, that can come from, okay, interesting, so you asked ChatGPT this question, it gave you this answer, let's dissect this answer. Like, are the primary sources cited correct? Is the reasoning logical? Does this actually support your point? And are there any biases? Like, that is a super rich conversation in and of itself that I think might help develop that critical thinking that is a little bit missing. People are very apt these days to be like, oh, well, I saw it, and so it must be true.
Right. No, particularly, I saw it online and it
Yeah.
must be true.
Right.
Yes. I'm going to share a tiny story about a friend who I'm not going to identify, but she had surgery on her foot, and
Mhm.
her surgeon, and she went through the stages of kind of, post-surgery, but she got to the point where she could wear a boot and she was allowed to move around with the boot. And the doctor said, always wear the boot, right? Only take it off to sleep, to shower, wear the boot.
Yeah.
Well, she thought that meant like wear the boot when you're walking. So she wouldn't put it on, and she developed plantar fasciitis
Oh.
in the bottom of her foot, this significant pain that anytime she walked was really painful. And she was panicked, like, oh my God, please tell me that I don't live with this pain post-surgery. And so she went online to AI and asked the question. And the response she got was, you have to always, 24 hours a day, wear the boot. And so she was like, because the boot helps your leg get used to the weight again,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
it supports the bottom of your foot getting used to bearing the weight again. And she was like, oh, so that's what I did. I just wore the boot again. I was like, but your doctor told you this in person. Your doctor said,
That's
wear the
so
boot.
funny.
But you don't, one, believe him enough, or two, trust him enough to call him back and say, my foot is hurting and what should I do? And here's what I've been doing. But AI
Wow.
is clearly the answer. Like whatever they gave you, that was clearly the answer. So it strikes me that we somehow trust it more in some ways than we might trust other humans.
That is a wild story. I was not expecting you to say that. That's
Yeah.
really wild.
And again, I say it just because I
Yeah.
think it's something that is maybe built into us as humans,
Yeah.
that how we create trust and what we trust, and how we've been, how we've developed our workarounds for things like this. So I'm really like, the reason it sticks with me is that I'm intrigued as to why one source is trusted more than another
Yeah.
source. And when you compare the two, from my perspective, I would say, why wouldn't you trust your doctor? Like, why? But apparently they didn't
Right.
explain it well enough, didn't explain
Yep.
it in a way that made sense to the audience,
Right.
right? They just said, do this. They didn't tell her why to do it.
Right.
Where
Right.
AI gave her the reason why she should be doing it. And so,
Right, right. And it's funny because this actually brings us like full circle back to the work that you do at Point Taken.
yeah,
But it sounds like that
yes.
doctor could have had a little bit of support in the way
Well,
that they communicated.
yeah, it brings you back full circle to understanding your audience, right?
Yes.
And audience analysis, and understanding who you're
Right.
talking to and what will be persuasive to them.
Yes.
And so the why of what you're asking them to do is probably incredibly important.
Totally. Absolutely.
And if you
Um,
miss off that, then they're not going to do it.
right. Absolutely. That's fascinating. What like a perfect way to encompass like that need to we maybe internally have a bias to, well, obviously
Yes.
just assume that this is correct, and it's like, no, let's see if it is indeed correct. Fantastic. So with everything you've shared, would love to hear how, like, what is the best way people can reach out to you directly if they have questions or want to
Oh,
explore your services?
absolutely. You can come visit our website, which is www.pointtaken.net. Full word point, the full word taken.net. You will find a way to send us a note from there. You also find our phone numbers if you want to reach us, and lots of video of examples of us doing things, but also questions that we have fielded before that we answer there, either in a blog post or in a video post. So there's a whole tips and techniques section where you can come and find some information. Yay.
Awesome. Great. Well, listen, Beth, I know we keep these short and sweet, but you
Mhm.
packed it with so much fascinating
Oh, this has just been so
info.
fun.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to our listeners. And we'll be back for more episodes.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. I really appreciate being invited today. And goodbye to everyone who's watching. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful.